What if Christmas joy had to be beaten back into the world? Well, that's where Klaus comes in. This is actually a Kickstarter edition that I picked up, I think 2 years ago, but I finally had the chance to read every single story. And while it's epic, there are actually a lot of differences between each story, and each one feels like an individually wrapped gift. So today's episode, I'll be talking about each individual story and ranking my favorites. Without further ado, let's dive in. This edition is badass, and not only is it badass, but the people behind it are equally incredible. Two legends come together to rewrite a Christmas classic in Grant Morrison and Dan Mora. So right away, my interest was piqued. The general idea here is that they're taking the actual myths behind Santa Claus and bringing them to life in comic book form. And wow. Obviously, they're not exactly, word for word from the myths. They're just inspired by the myths, but nonetheless, what an amazing idea. And they really stuck the landing. If you're looking to pick up just one of these, well, I would highly recommend picking up the original because it is very different than the rest. It 100% takes itself the most serious and really is the origin story of Klaus in this world. Essentially, he was a part of this amazing kingdom, and then he got the boot because of the fact that he was accused of killing the king. Obviously, that's not the case. But regardless, he got the boot. So after many years, he returns a wild man and with a dire wolf. So forget about reindeers in this version of Santa Claus. And this kingdom now, after years of being tormented by a corrupt baron, is essentially the Grinch's dream. Just a bunch of sad kids and a mining community that is overworked beyond belief. So in this case, he's not necessarily just coming to spread joy and cheer. He's literally coming to restore balance. And it gets a little bloody. Essentially, this Santa Claus is like, what if Batman became Santa Claus? Because this dude is doing parkour, jumping buildings, using everything around him at his disposal to get the job done, and does it pretty incognito most of the time. So outside of being cool because it grabs a bunch of Nordic lore, it is also a really great story. It has an awesome love triangle, it has betrayal, as I mentioned previously, and you might not expect it, but it even has demons. Yup. This is not your typical Christmas story. But what's cool is that the demon isn't alone. He's actually referred to as the opposite of the shining people. So, who are the shining people? Well, they're the ones who give Santa Claus his powers. And they're actually the people behind, or the entities I should say, behind him crafting all those toys. At first, this isn't his idea like, oh, I'm going to craft a bunch of toys and I'm going to bring it to the kids in this miserable castle. Nope. He actually does it in his sleep with the spirits guiding him, or the shining people, I should say, guiding him. And while he starts by just creating toys in his sleep with the help of the shining people do a lot more when he's left for dead, and essentially dies and then gets resurrected as Santa Claus. Or as close to Santa Claus as this story gets. Amazing. I don't want to spoil too much here because I do want you to pick up this book, whether it's this year or next year or whenever you're watching this, because it is worth reading 100%. Anyways, as you may guess, by the end of this, he becomes Santa Claus. And it is just epic throughout. So that's why this one ranks number 1 for me. After becoming Santa Claus, he also becomes immortal. So it goes without saying that the story doesn't end here. Enter book number 2, The Witch of Winter. So if you don't know, Elsa is actually based off The Witch of Winter as well. So they grabbed from Nordic mythology there. And in this case, she's the bad guy. And story number 2 really embraces the weird. It's something that continues throughout 3 and 4 as well. But if you read the first one, and then you read this one, it does feel extremely different. These stories go into him after becoming Santa Claus, and well after everybody in that castle has already died, and it's generations later. Now, with more than enough direwolf to pull his sleigh, they are still called all the traditional names, so that's cool. It's a cool little touch. But this version of Santa is out for blood. Acting as kind of like the hero of Christmas, he goes off to save 2 kids that have disappeared. What's a cool touch here is that we find out that Klaus has actually stopped being Santa Claus at this point. Because there's just too many people in the world, he says. And the myth doesn't work at that type of scale. It isn't just Klaus in the mix, it's many different versions of Klaus from many different myths around the world. And if you thought Elsa wasn't enough, well, this one actually also features Geppetto, which is a nice cool touch. And while The Witch of Winter is really, really cool and it is a huge tonal shift that kind of sets you up for the rest of the books that are going to follow, that lackluster ending really puts it down on the list after you read the other ones. Because I think the other ones do a better job with the tone. That's why this one ranks number 4. Alright, so we have our first and we have our fourth. Now it's time to move on to our third, which is Klaus and the Crisis in Xmasville. So my favorite part about this one is that it deals with corporate greed, and it's essentially a straight up jab at Coca-Cola at the same time. Because obviously Coca-Cola uses Santa Claus heavily around Christmas to advertise its drink. Another thing that I loved about this story is that there's no holding back on the weirdness. So not only is there an evil doppelganger world, kind of like the Dark Multiverse in DC, there are also Martians. Okay. I don't really get it, but these stories are, in the best way possible, all over the place. And they just feel like giant, chaotic Christmas tales. But obviously a lot bloodier and a lot more brutal. And I know I mentioned Batman previously, but this story literally has Santa Claus's Batcave. It doesn't actually belong to the Claus that we've been following. It belongs to Grandfather Frost, the Russian version of Santa Claus. This one has a ton of action, dives further into the lore, and it really feels a lot tighter from a story perspective compared to Witch of Winter. So because of that, because of all the new elements like the Martians, the Dark Multiverse essentially version of Santa Claus, which kind of looks like Lobo, I rank this story third. Now last but definitely not least, my pick for number 2, Klaus and the Crying Snowman. This one falls into second place because it has everything I loved about the last one, and a couple drops of the things that I loved about the first original book, which is a lot more heart. Because this story revolves around, but not fully revolves around, a dying snowman or a melting snowman. So in this case, once a snowman starts to melt, he starts to get dementia and he starts to essentially fade. So he ages really, really rapidly. But the thing is, if you put him on a cold planet, he supercharges. So that's why this one takes place on Saturn's moons. Like I said, these are really all over the place. It actually also talks about Ragnarok, and you think that there's a potential second coming of Ragnarok that's going to happen. And then you get to the final understanding of what happened with Ragnarok in the first place. It really dives into mythology a lot, goes into space, but at its core still has this really great emotional touch with the snowman that's melting. Obviously, there's a lot more to the snowman that's melting that I'm not going into for your sake if you decide to read the story, but it's really touching. Now, the reason that this one comes second for me is because out of all the books, first of all, they all look beautiful because they're done by Dan Mora, but this one really takes the cake. It jumps through so many different worlds and so many different areas and so many different imaginations of how these things can look that it just blew my mind. Like the amount of time that must have gone into researching all of these different materials and things and beasts and demons and reindeer and goat fighters. It's just great. All that put together is why this one is at number 2. Now, before closing out, there's one book that's not in here that I need to see. Even I don't care if I have it super nice, great collection that like I'm super happy to have. I feel like it's something that I'll be able to read to my kids as they get older. Just look at that inside. It's sick. I don't care. I still want another story, and that's because throughout all of these stories, minus the first one because the first one is really the origin, they keep referencing a civil war on the moon. And even at the beginning of the second one, Witch of Winter, you find out that Klaus was actually chained up to the moon, but because of specific events, he essentially got freed. And that's how he ended up there, so that he could save those 2 kids. So yeah, don't you want to see a civil war on the moon featuring a battalion of different Santa Clauses? I know I do. So please, Grant Morrison, Dan Mora, get together one more time. Even if it breaks my beautiful collection, I don't care. Just do it for the fans, because we all need to see what that civil war looks like. And spend as much time on it as you did with the first book. The first one was a lot longer than the others, and I think that maybe that's part of the reason why the others felt a little bit more chaotic, which I didn't mind, but I do want to see you spend the proper amount of time on that story, because it seems to be a linchpin to all of these stories. So please, Grant Morrison, please, Dan Mora, I have a Christmas wish for you, and that is write the next one. But to all of you, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you're celebrating, I hope you're celebrating with friends, family, or both. And until next time, keep it geeky.